Does the process for managing risk need to be deeply complex to spot even greater risks?
That is a fantastic question. That is sort of like one of the all-time questions and one of the big debates that's going out there today, especially in like banking risk, where there's all these complex regulations that are there.
And do people really understand them all? Is that another issue?
Yeah, I mean, people don't understand them. Even when they're being implemented, they don't. I mean, look at the news stories you see where, say, the New York Fed, says one thing to a bank, and then the Federal Reserve Board of Governors comes in and says something else, or the OCC and the Federal Reserve, and they're all working to get on the same page with each other. The issue here is that there's this perception that you need something incredibly complex. And it turns out that when you add a complex risk management process on top of a complex real world, you're increasing your complexity. And remember, what are our three catalysts of risk? Change, complexity, and fatigue. You've just increased that complexity factor. You've increased risk. So risk that is more effective is risk that is simple, so that everybody can implement it. It is risk that is humble and appreciating what you don't know and understand about the world. And it is risk is a process that gives you margin, right? It's just like having inventory buffer levels in stores, right? So you're not running everything to the last just-in-time inventory level or the last carton of milk, tracked by barcodes. So a simpler process is often far, far more effective because mathematically it reduces the complexity factor. And then back to your human brain, great question, it makes it easier for more people to implement so you can do it at the coalface. It's not something that's stuck with just some risk management team. It is something that everybody can do, and that then these phrases we toss around about risk is everybody's job really becomes a reality. So complex risk management tends to increase risk, very bad, and we try to fight that every place we can.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, terrific, Sam. Delighted to be here.
Man, so do you remember that that actual event there? There's a lot of great material from that particular interview. Was that familiar to you? Was that too much of a throwback?
No. That's great. It's from pre-COVID. I mean, it's like, wow. I was wearing a suit and a tie in Manhattan. Today I'm wearing my sailing shirt and just out on the sailing boat for Memorial Day weekend and having lots of fun. But yeah, absolutely, we can connect with that kind of material. And it's just fascinating to be able to develop this over time. And now having our conversation where we're applying it to blockchain and Web3, decentralized data, DApps, so many innovative things that we can do here in this community.
Absolutely. You've got quite an impressive background. And I could probably spend about 15 minutes, going through everything, but I just thought I'd share a couple of highlights. So you're director and head of analytics, ValueBridge Advisors, Burnt Oak Capital, focus on growing companies and investment funds. Previously, you actually led innovation initiatives for IBM, Lucent, which is now Nokia, Ameritech, now AT&T, right. Across which you led teams to 9 patents and launched a pioneering fintech product. You've also done a lot of finance and operations at the University of Detroit, Mercy, and economics at Western Michigan University. It's fair to say you've been around tech quite a bit, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you get into tech and it's like, you and I know each other from the intersection of tech and finance and economics, and they grow together, and it's such an opportunity to make it all happen. And that's why when you take those pieces and you put them together with an innovative community, that's where the magic really happens.
Yes. We connected through the interconnections of the digital economists. And I remember the first time, being on it was one of the group conference calls, the Center of Excellence calls. And I was just hearing all of these extraordinary backgrounds and yours. I mean, whether it was AI, whether it was financial markets, you had a hand or experience in each and every single one of those. And so it's been great to have this friendship with you and to keep in touch. And it was recently, I want to say, when I was in Paris for the blockchain summit, I was sharing with you just some of the, I guess, the realities, right? That despite all the hype, all the billions of dollars that have gone into blockchain, we still have yet to really break through to the mainstream. And that's where our conversation kind of picked back up. So yeah, I guess if you want to maybe give a little background and perspective about yourself, I would love for you to share with the audience, and then we can kind of hop into that discussion and maybe get your opinion and thoughts for our community as to how maybe they can make some of the avoid some of the mistakes that others have in the past. So a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so it's really, I'm about three things, and you've covered, those. So first of all, I'm a technologist, and in the 9 patents and the first fintech product at IBM. That's longer ago than I care to remember. But for your audience, it's important to know that this thing has been going for a long time and has been developing, and they can ride that. It's not like they have to start yesterday and have no memory of what was in the past, successes and failures. The second thing is about product management. And that's something that goes all the way back to my university days. And that video that you showed, that was around the Operational Risk Handbook. And in there was a chapter on product management and how you bring those together to cut your risk, to make it simpler so that everybody can become part of the party. And that's just not like financial risk or risks and ops, but that's also sales risk as well. That's all part of new product management. And then the third thing is I'm just sort of a data guy, and a lot of us out there are, and we like tearing apart equations. And so that's one of the things for the graduate seminar I currently teach. We just wrapped last week. I'm always looking at equations. Even if you think about miles per hour, what if I tell you your average speed from New York to Albany is 53.5 miles an hour? What does that really tell you? What can you validly inference from that, right? You have no idea whether a snowstorm or rainstorm, whether you're going 110 miles an hour and you were pulled over for a big chunk of it for a speeding ticket. You have no idea, right? Whether you're drinking coffee all the way and making pit stops, there's very little that you can infer from a statistic. And so we really need to understand the limits of the math. And, that's what crosses over those three things that would cross over all the different areas that you mentioned. It's just fun.
No, and that definitely comes out. I mean, one thing I like about you, Brian, is that you like to simplify things down, right? You like to and ask the very basic questions. So let's kind of, I guess, maybe start from the beginning. I mean, from somebody like yourself, who's, as you mentioned, you've seen several different innovations, from garage to mainstream, over the generations. What is your overall thought about what you're seeing in blockchain? Like, in general, what is your opinion on what you're seeing right now?
Well, first of all, I want to plug a friend's book because you said over the generations. And so Harry Evans, great guy, he wrote a book, Made in America, 2 Centuries of Innovation. And it goes over 200 years from the steam engine to the search engine. And I would encourage everybody to get a copy of that book, especially if like you and I were in New York City, but it's all over the world.
Right.
But it talks about these things, and you get into the inventor's mindset, and you can start using technology to translate into fixing a problem. I mean, and then there's the story of the first credit bureau. Did you know that Abraham Lincoln, future president of the United States, was a credit checker for part of his career?
No, not at all. Not at all.
This is the kind of stuff that's in there, and these amazing stories, right? And it's just fascinating. You can see they made it into a PBS series out of WGBH in Boston. So if you want to do the iPod, while you're on the treadmill, you can do that too, whatever it is, audiobooks. but it just puts you in the inventor's mindset. And the way he writes, a lot of books are about the technical piece, but he writes about the creative process. And the issue is solving a real problem that people will pay for. And that's what's missing now, to answer your question, in so much of the blockchain community. Because you've got
Right.
people that can code, right? But why do we got a gazillion payments products, right? It's because everybody's making payments and they're trying to make little incremental improvements on the other person's payments. But there are all these burning issues that can be solved in the world of Web3, decentralized data, and DApps. And those are largely being unexplored because the coders lack contextual knowledge. Or very often, and this is where Harold Evans' book helps, they're just not opening their eyes to what's available to them.
Solving a problem that, I often see that, kind of come up, right? Is you see, blockchain products come out, and the number one question, shout out to Tyler over at the SDF. One of the first questions he will always ask, even if I bring up an idea, is, can you do this without blockchain? So shout out to Tyler for that one. Yeah. Can you do this without blockchain? That's a great question that oftentimes, doesn't even come up to the mind. And I think, maybe partly because of the hype machine, and, people are just thinking, okay, if I just bring something out, I slap blockchain on it, I add some tokens, I'm going to magically make money. But more often than not, what we end up seeing are extreme failures, people, investing in products and blockchains and foundations that go nowhere. And here we are, in 2022, still kind of going around in circles.
Right. And so getting to those real problems is the issue. And I see, so many startup conferences where people go on to, you and I are in some of the same ones through the Digital Economist, right? The Entrepreneurs and Training Program and all that. And it's again, is that limited background, right? They got to program some blockchain, they went and bought some crypto, and now they're trying to do something. And that's why we get the gazillion flavors of payments. And now we get the gazillion flavors of NFT, but guess what? Because of the architectural problems, a lot of those are open to fraud. Where's the single source of truth? And there's another error, and that's that because I'm taking a hash and putting that on a block, that provides me with security. Well, that's been totally blown up in the last year after theft after theft after theft after theft, because security wasn't good. I was up the road at Columbia University, and talking and giving an example at a blockchain conference, and it's one I use often. But imagine kids making paper chains like in kindergarten, right? And they put a staple in the paper chain. That's the hash. Now that staple is going to stay even as some kid comes running from across the room and breaks the paper chain. So the hash is good, but there's all these other weaknesses that are out there because nobody really thought of cybersecurity in a comprehensive way around this stuff. Or now we're going to, POS solutions, and people think, oh, it's got the Byzantine general solution in it, it's got to be good, right? No, that was developed to keep servers that one might fall down from just updating each other. There was no adversarial anything as part of that, despite its militaristic sounding name. And the other thing that we've got is that, and so again, shout out to Tyler. So much of this is, in the gray zone, right? So much of what the bad name of blockchain is because it facilitates fraud. Well, I say turn it around and use blockchain, and it's not just blockchain, but Web3, real decentralized data, real DApps to go and fight fraud. There are so many parts of this world, and I've been doing this, talk for World Bank and Inter-American Development Bank about how it can be a fraud fighter. And that's a big opportunity for blockchain. And so people that are coming
Yeah.
from countries that see it up front and up close and in person, they can go and fight. I mean, one example are agricultural cooperatives where people are skimming. And now because of, Putin's invasion and aggression and brutality in Ukraine, right, we've got all these food shortages.
Right.
The number one, number two producers of sunflower oil are taken out now because of this. So when we look at fraud in agricultural cooperatives, wherever it is, right, Latin America, Africa, Asia, wherever you want to go, communities can get together and provide information into a chain. But here's the thing, it's decentralized data, right? It means it's not sitting in a server in that country. It can be wherever in the world you want it to be. And now you can add up and say, who is skimming? And we're going to have skimming worse now because of the food inflation and the shortages and everything else. And how can public visibility be put into these things? So that's a great opportunity. And there's so many more, that are out there that can be looked at. But that's just one because it's very popular in the news.
Well, and I think that's a great point, and I'm glad that you're talking to the World Bank, because so often you hear the opposite story of, like you said, is that blockchain is where all the fraud is happening. When a lot of us here are yelling exactly what you are saying, not as eloquently, of course, but that, hey, no, actually, this is a great tool to prevent that. One thing that you had in our earlier conversations that I thought was quite interesting was how politics has infected and affected, the growth path of and trajectory that we've seen in the blockchain community. I was hoping maybe you could touch on that a little bit.
Well, it's different in different countries, and it often mirrors, at least in my observation, I haven't done an exhaustive survey, but it mirrors attitudes toward gold. So in some countries, gold is just something that you do, right? Like in Germany, you do some gold, right? In the US, it tends to be politicized. People on the left and people on the right tend to be gold buyers. Why? Because they distrust the middle. And so that's where you see, again, and now this is spreading, right, over the years, because you've got the global community, just like we're participating in right now with your show. You've got more people that are lining up who distrust the middle. And so all those people tend to gravitate toward blockchain because they distrust the middle. The problem is we've also had some issues, which we don't need to go into here because I've got lots of ink, but governance of blockchain models. And so the opportunity here, and again, this is where it's not blockchain, it's Web3, it's decentralized data, it's DApps, where that provides so much more opportunity because it's opening up functionality that we've never had before in the world of blockchain. Why? Because we've never been able to have relational-like database capabilities in the world of blockchain. And so blockchain is fragmented. And because it's fragmented, it's ripe for fraud. And because of all the narrow, focused people just confusing the hash, we haven't done the cybersecurity thing right. So once you put real problems like preventing fraud, and then you put real new product management, and then you do real risk management inclusive of cybersecurity, now you've got the ability for a whole new world to blossom around this community. And that, I think, has got a lot of potential.
So I know right now there's an executive listening to this talk, and they've heard you mention Web3 about 3 to 4 times. And they're like, all right, Sam, what the hell is this Web3 thing that he keeps talking about? How would you explain that to the audience listening in so that way they can understand exactly how all these tools, you hear the keywords of Bitcoin and blockchain and all these different cryptos, etc. what does this mean in the context of Web3? How would you describe it?
So you can have technical explanations, but I like to describe it not too technically, but functionally, right? But you got to get
Right.
a little bit into it. So functionally, it's two real things. One, it gives you relational like database qualities, even better than relational like database qualities. So you can do all these things that are currently totally excluded in the blockchain world because all you're doing is putting staples in a paper chain over and over and over again, block, blah, block, blah, block. The second thing is so you can tackle the security problem. And the same security problem that you have in the real world, where you've got people going, oh, it's too hard to do security, so I won't, right? They won't use Tor browser. They won't do a million other things to protect their privacy. So once you've got user-friendly security, and it's user-friendly for a developer to implement to make it user-friendly for an end user, and you've got the capabilities for a developer to create applications that can be used as easily as a centralized database application could be, that is what I see as Web3. Now, there's some enabling technologies underneath that, like fast verification across decentralized databases, and that enables a collaboration and a bunch of other things. So that's the next sort of layer down on that. But I focus it on functionally opening this whole new world of capabilities. And that's where my example about the agricultural comes in,
Right.
right? Because that way everybody can go and say, I'm a farmer. I can type in my thing into a database that's not in my country where corruption is rife. I put my data in. Somebody else puts their data in. The next middle party gets it and they put their thing in, and then so on and so on and so on. And you can see where the skim is coming from. You can see who is going in and taking out the information. And it doesn't need to be financial data. You can put in climate data, for goodness sakes, all kinds of
Right.
things. Anything where you want to have sort of community integrity in data, and you believe in that model where I don't want to have the data centralized in any one place, because I see some sort of risk associated with that, whether it's business continuity or whether it is, some kind of political fraud risk. That's huge opportunity to be beneficial in the global context.
So over on Stellar Global, one of the main reason for starting this was that I saw this this tool that can connect the people from all over the globe to come together and to figure out, okay, how to build businesses, how to build businesses with applications, good services, leveraging Web3 technology. What I've seen is that, as you mentioned earlier on, is that a lot of folks that are in this space early on, we're all early adopters, understand the tech side, but not the other aspect of it, of like, okay, how do I take what I have in my head and what works on paper into something that can penetrate the market? And so I wanted to go through that process briefly for folks here. Where do we start with? Is it value proposition? Is that the first thing we should start off with when we look at starting some sort of business or organization?
Well, it's the value proposition is number two.
Number
First, you
two.
need a deep understanding of the problem you're trying to solve, a superior understanding of the problem you're trying to solve. And again, using my agriculture example, because you grew up as the son or daughter of a farmer, and you saw this, and you heard your parents complain, and you saw them lose money, to some place, and you're trying to figure out where it is. It could be because you've got a clothing business and you're just trying to make inventory more efficient and try to not get ripped off in the supply chain so you can make your buck as the end person. Or you're in between someplace, you're providing fabric and you don't want to get ripped off. Whatever it is, you've got a clear understanding of a real tangible problem that you can solve. That allows you to then unlock the value of the new product management process. And I'll plug another book here. I've got it right here. This is the main book in new product management. It's called the Crawford book, Merle Crawford and Tony DiBenedetto. It's the one I was raised on and the one I've made, millions and, on for products that I've launched. That's where you get into the value proposition. So once you've got your idea and you're trying to get it clarified and socialize it, then there's a classic 3-point value proposition. The first statement is for customers who, fill in the blank. And that's defining the needs of the customer and getting that real clear in your mind. And again, that's where having a deep understanding of the problem helps. The second bullet is we offer. And this is a generic statement of what it is you're offering. And it puts you in a space with people who are and who are not your competitors. And then the third bullet point is different because. What are we doing differently? And this gets back to can you do it with blockchain or not? Right? Mm-hmm. Because given how I just defined Web3, you don't want a database sitting in your basement or down the street at the local service provider that somebody can go in and just drive a truck through, take a sledgehammer to whatever to, and you're out of business.
Right.
And also, by the way, you're trying to collaborate with other people. So you want this in whatever other countries you deem safe, so that if somebody totally destroys your laptop and blasts it to smithereens with a sledgehammer, it affects nobody else. And you go to another laptop and you're back in business because you open it up, put in your credentials, and away you go. Mm-hmm. So that is the beauty of this. And I say that as literally somebody who had a friend who's had a tank driven through his, front window of his house to give a gentle message to his father that it was time to leave the country.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So you've heard a thing or two, so you know a thing or two.
Yeah. So you gotta, think through these pieces. And that's where people who are doing this, they're really taking personal risk. I mean, it's not like you and I crossing New York City streets, which is risky enough, right?
Right.
But they're taking serious risk. And you want to protect those people as much as they can and give them the resources to do that. And that's what Web3 with true relational database-like qualities and then ease of use of security is about. And that's where it can enable all these sorts of things in the world. If you can do it for bird tracking, but you don't need it for bird tracking, right? You may want it because. So, but this is awesome. This is what is very helpful. There's other applications you might want it for security, right? For energy. So if one part of a grid goes down or one unit goes down, everybody else can operate independently in as many locations as you want. That's beyond sort of a cloud provider kind of notion. So all these things are, have very, useful business cases. And so when somebody says, I got payments, my answer to them, other than the shout out we've already done, is, okay, what kind of payments? And where does this really matter? Right? And why does it really matter? Here's another one, right? For people that have multiple passports or reside in one country other than their home country, right now, arbitraging interest rates is awesome. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at Brooklyn or Queens, right? However many hundred languages the census says are spoken there, right? You got a lot of people from other countries. All these, a lot of them are small business people. And how can they arbitrage interest rates now as things are going on in the world? So that's an opportunity, right? All these different pieces are opportunities. And of course, they don't want to get ripped off. So it's blockchain to protect them from the bad doer who would just take advantage of them otherwise. It's to protect them and it's to help grow things. So lots of opportunities. Am I answering the question?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. It's one of the things too I see often, and we've seen it with a lot of these blockchain protocols that went under, is the issues when it comes down to their governance and architecture, and I know that's something that you're passionate about as well. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe some insights people can start looking out for when they're building their own.
Yeah. So on the governance piece, I mean, it's all about your Swiss foundation, and there I look at good governance models, and I'll give a shout out to our friends at Source.network, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they've got a real mission in their foundation, and I think that's fantastic. And but not all of them do. You can, I mean, those are all documents you can go get online and read through. So, what is it that they're trying to achieve from the governance, and then how is it structured and how is it set up, right? Because you want to be in a community that's going to be self-reinforcing and that's going to attract people in, and so it grows. And that, I mean, that's a big thing behind almost anything, right? Concert venues or whatever it is. You
Right,
want a
right.
self-reinforcing thing for influencers, but you've got to have the underlying pieces that make it valuable for that to happen. And again, that comes to the architecture pieces. Because when you got the architecture pieces that are one, available, and two, you've got a community of people that you can turn to, right? For guidance and assistance. I mean, just think of all the people that are using GitHub for this or whatever. But
Right.
now it's in these particular things. And so it's got to be people that are in that community that have done other apps. Now you've got that self-reinforcing, or the famous flywheel effect from the business literature, that you can take advantage of. And so that's where I would look. And again, if you're not doing the technologies that create relational database like quality, even better than relational database quality, and if you are not doing the security with ease of use, then you you can't get much farther than a payments app, because you can't do real stuff that does real heavy lifting that makes a difference in the world.
Yeah, ease of use, ease of use. I think it's deeply deeply important. We were chatting prior to getting on. I was telling you about the video I just did where you know someone was able to actually send money through a Stellar app, and then or even onload. So you can go to someone could go to a CVS store, take cash, put it into a CVS store, unload it onto a wallet, and then transfer that wallet to Argentina within seconds. Then they can then cash out and go pay their bills and or use that to save. I think that it's a matter of having some, like you said, some clear cross border or clear meaning behind what you're trying to build or to grow in order for the public to really gain interest and buy into what you're trying to do. One thing I know you talked about in the past too was the importance of a marketing sales funnel, and really having that interplaying into what you're trying to build. Can you explain a little bit about the marketing sales funnel piece of getting a successful entrepreneur business going?
Yeah, so it flows out of the new product management book, and there's actually a professional association that Merle Crawford founded. It's pdma.org, Product
Mm-hmm.
Development and Management Association.org. So people that have ambitions of growing and partnering and connecting with other big companies around the world, I'd certainly encourage them to become members, and then they can meet all.
PDMA.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. Then they can meet, people at all these big firms who could be, partners or potential acquirers.
Mm.
But the marketing sales funnel says, again, you've got to start with a deep understanding of your business. You've got to start with an understanding of your blockchain, or of your value prop for your blockchain, or we're talking Web3. Now what we do is we think about the process that somebody encounters this, right? So somebody sends it to Sam. Sam puts it out on Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. And then it goes out and somebody sees it. And to go, okay, let me click. Let me click to learn a little bit. Okay, I'm interested. Let me click again to learn a little bit more. And you're giving people bite-sized pieces. And here's where it becomes really subtle, is that how can they get enough information that's exactly what they need in order to be able to purchase? You want to minimize the need for them to have to interact to have a question answered, because that is far more costly. So it's thinking about that content that gets people through. And then that's where you have your buyer personas. And you think about all these different people. As I'm using it just because I'm an individual going to CVS, as in your example a minute ago. Am I using it because I'm a small business person and I'm using it for financial purposes, money transfer, a loan in another country? Am I using it for inventory management and making sure I'm not being ripped off in the supply chain? What's the reason and how does this help me? So the more that can be automated, the more you can have your questions. This is where explainer videos come in. All these pieces to progressively answer questions. And where that's very important for founders is if they don't get that right, then founders are forever dragged into a sales cycle, especially with partners, anybody who's big, and they are forever going through that and they're defocusing on their business. And so that is a big piece of this equation, to keep, founders focused on growing and not getting sucked in. When they don't have it, it means that no salesperson that they hired, no customer support person, no pre-sales person, they're ever truly independent. They're always coming back and asking for some special situation. So you want to lay it into your progression.
Good
And
advice.
that's the sort of the magic behind that. And that, remember, two things. One, a deep contextual understanding of the problem you're trying to solve. And then two, using that new product management process, because then you're getting boost, you're getting sales, you're getting wind in your sales, and that's propelling you forward. And that's where the big payoffs are going to come from. Because you're
Nice,
not,
nice, nice.
just like you said at the beginning, Sam, simplify.
Simplify, simplify. I know we got about maybe like 10, 15 minutes left. I wanted to jump in briefly because I think all this kind of leads up to, if you're a founder, building that right team around you, because I mean, it takes a team. It takes a team to make this all work, all come together. And I always believe in knowing what you're not good at, right? Focus on what you're good at and then find others that are better at what you're not. So maybe describe a little bit about in maybe your own process or maybe some books that you've read that give some insight onto what it takes to build a good team.
So one of my favorite things you already put forward there, in the new product management book from Crawford that I just showed you. So it talks about the roles that are necessary for a good team. And each one of those roles, there's two sets of things. One, they need to have technical competency, but that's not enough. They need to have critical thinking, systems thinking, and design thinking. And that's all driven by an intellectual curiosity. Some of that intellectual curiosity people are born with. Some you can help them open up to. Very often I see technical people, especially when I'm doing things in cybersecurity or coding, and they're just so focused. They're just so narrow in what they're doing. And it's because they're not bringing the rest of their life experience in. And when I go in and do workshops, or when I get in, over my head, I've got a PhD psychologist who happens to have done AI programming, and he's, does a garage band and fixes motorcycles and all these kinds of things. So he's great for programmers. But it is an ability to understand and open people's minds, because they're rock climbers. They ride motorcycles. They might be in a garage band. all kinds of things. They could be artists, painters, scuba divers, private pilots, all these kinds of things that people might do. And you want to bring in that. They might be, aspiring fiction writers and always write. Bring that into what you're doing. Bring that into the team and use that to get the critical thinking, systems thinking, and design thinking that's needed to be successful. That's very powerful. And so that facilitation on top of the expertise of the different roles, full stack developer. Okay. Yeah. Right. but what, how do we harness the full whole person? And that gets into the diverse high performing teams where your friend and my friend Prachit Kale from the Digital Economist is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's because what you're saying is very difficult to do. Because I have seen so many times, I would say, companies that I've seen pop up. A lot of the failures come down to the teams butting heads, right? I mean, you see this happen, so often. And I don't know. I guess everything is great in the beginning, right? In the beginning, everybody's happy. Everybody says the right things, but it always seems like somewhere in the middle, once the real work starts to come in, that's when we see things go sour.
Yeah, yeah. But see, I always saw that in two ways.
I love it. Only two ways.
Yeah, it got to simplify, Sam. Simplify.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it.
So one path is to understand where the person is coming from technically, because sometimes it's because they simply don't know that something else exists. Because a lot of these people are young and they haven't been exposed to stuff. They've never been in team environments before other than school projects or other startups. And a lot of those had dysfunctional experiences. So they've never been in a really enjoyable, empowering kind of environment for doing whatever their task is, right? And that can be development to, web design for the marketing campaign, or people who are doing the finance function and payroll and whatever it is. So you've got those pieces and you help them develop the richness of what they're doing there. The second piece is what we just mentioned, and you bring out the personality pieces, because a lot of them are just dogging it, right? They're just completely overwhelmed. They're living on coffee and donuts, and that's it. And once we unleash that person that's within, once we bring those collaborative pieces together, and then you get the collaboration going over with the technical skill on the other side, and you bring those two together, that's where Prachi and I do these outcome accelerator workshops and her diverse high performing team coaching. And people are laughing. I mean, I'm doing one on Friday, and been prepping for it earlier today. And we talk about how to get people to the whiteboard, how to get people having fun, how to get people laughing, how do people see the aha moment. And that just changes the dynamics all around. I mean, we talked about Swiss foundations. I did one in Switzerland one time.
Beautiful place. Beautiful place.
Yeah. And, it is so nice, right? When people start energizing. And the company spent a bunch of money. They brought people in from the UK and Germany and other locations where, parts of the team where I came in from the States. And we did great stuff, right? And we walked through this. And the guy who was a team leader in Zurich, he just said, "Brian, you're so patient." And I said, "Well, I'm patient because I've done this. And I see the good times that results at the end of every one of these." And, in the operational risk handbook that interview is from, I even spend 2 chapters walking through how to go through this. And I do it, depending upon the setting, 2.5 days, 3.5 days. It's half days because everybody travels home the afternoon of the last day. But
Right.
That's the
Not.
beauty of it. And it is so attainable. It's so attainable. And it's just so sad when you see these implosions and the anger, and it was totally unnecessary.
No, I love it. I love it, man. That's a great way to close this off. I think that, too often people take things way too serious. And one of the great things always talking with you has been, your ability to, I believe, to really, take things, take things easily, simplify things down. And I'm glad that you talked about just people need to embrace, why you got into this to begin with, right? You got into this to begin with because you want to do something positive, change the world. And if you focus in on that and you have a little fun, maybe you just might do it.
And sometimes you have more fun than you realize. And that's awesome, especially when you're doing it to help somebody else and solve a real problem.
That's right. That's right. Listen, Brian, it was a pleasure. I hope everyone enjoyed the chat. We'll definitely have to fly out to get on your boat. Because I know you were cleaning it last time we talked, so I need to go out there and hang out with you a little bit on that and see how it goes. To everybody else that's been listening, I hope you guys got something. I want to plug. You plugged some great books. I want to plug Think.Design.Cyber.com. Briefly, talk about that a little bit. Think.Design.Cyber.com. People can go out there. What's the focus of this organization here?
Very simply, it is the first ever to bring design thinking to cybersecurity, and in particular, the industrial strength flavor of design thinking to cybersecurity, as opposed to just the UX stuff that you use in any software product or use to design anti-phishing emails. So huge thing, never been done before. And your friend and my friend, Prachit Kale, and I co-founded that. And that's related to the Cyber Theory Institute, where we've got a couple other co-founders to do even bigger and better stuff.
Awesome. Well, tell Prachi I need to do a show with her next. Incredible. Hang on real tight. To everybody else, check in next week. I'll be back with another podcast. I hope you enjoyed this. It will be up on Spotify starting tomorrow. And where you can also catch all of the previous episodes as well. Thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.